2017 was a surprisingly busy year for the Future Sound of London and their various side projects, with the release of a triple album, an album of live improvisations, a calendar album, an EP accompanied by a book, and a new collaborative project. By this point, it had become fairly clear that we weren't going to be getting any major 4 or 5 year gaps anymore, like we had done in the past. And indeed, this was proved by the 2018 releases already being announced by the end of 2017. So we'll be looking at the first couple of those today on this episode of Earthbeat Visions, a history of the future sound of London. We start with FSOLDigital presents 2018 calendar album. Release date 28th of October 17 for the calendars, 20th of January to 29th December 2018 for the music. The 2017 calendar album was an intriguing and generally successful experiment, but there wasn't much thought within the fanbase that this would be an ongoing series. But in October 17, the following year's album was put up for pre-order, as well as 2 physical calendars. Each calendar came with the same album, making a double purchase unnecessary, and happily the two were split between older and newer images. A music-only option was also available from the start this time. My calendars are currently located about 150 miles away, so I can't do many photos or scans, but I'll give you a quick run through of what's on them. Calendar 1, over its 12 pages, includes the cover of Teachings from the Electronic Brain, a montage of images including several from the Dead Cities book, the Lifeform single cover, and the full From the Archives Volume 2 cover image including Spiky, the My Kingdom cover with a newly created Spiky model, 1991 Papua New Guinea cover, Ignition of the Sun cover, Archived Environmental Views 3LP cover, e-cover of Far Out Son of Lung, Accelerator 2016 reissue cover with the FSOL pyramid logo and Japanese text from the album's rear, stack humanoid text with a screenshot from the Euro Techno video, Lifeforms cover from the Archives Volume 1 and 3 digital covers, Environment 6 and 6.5 CD covers. Calendar 2, alongside several bits of art from the FSOLDigital era, including archived 8 artwork seen in the CD and vinyl templates given over to the manufacturer, also had exclusive pictures, including a Far Out Son of Lung video screenshot with technical text about voltage, facts and radio over it, black and white circuit board imagery, a long exposure shot of stars moving over a stark, rocky landscape, monochrome photos of Gaz and Brian with binary over the top, a volcanic lake photo with frozen organic oxygen text, water damage effect and EBV logo, Alan Dougans cityscape photography, a collage with a tree photograph overlaid with text about medicine, a tower block photo, copper press cuttings, the herd killing curves and EBV logos, and text reading the future sound of London, I dream of wires. In the bottom right corner of each page are the curves and EBV logos, and the 1991 Papua New Guinea cover. The album itself is comparable with the previous years, with 8 FSOL pieces, tracks from Symphony and Humanoid, and 2 new aliases, Filter and Pulses, and analog controlled solenoids. As the year progressed, more information was given with the tracks, with pieces announced as outtakes from Environment 6 and From the Archives Volume 9, and dating from the early 90s through to the late 10s. Many of the tracks feature outro environments, although the original release has no attempt to create a flow by mirroring them between pieces, as there was between the first 2 tracks on the 2017 calendar. Other than a couple of clearly 90s pieces, 303 HF5 and Transmission Edit 6, the material generally feels like it could come from a new album. 303 HF5 is also noticeably louder than the rest of the album on the original release, making it a slightly jarring listen. The tracks are mostly a touch longer than pieces released around this era, with every track running to longer than 3 minutes and most around the 5-minute mark, which results in a decent length record. Alongside the 2017, 19 and 20 albums, it was reissued in lossless audio for the first time in 2021 when it appeared on the group's Bandcamp page with additional crossfades and environments. At this point, Control Vista was swapped from the Filter and Pulses alias to FSOL Digitana. The future sound of London, Destination. 2018's calendar opens with Destination, a mid-tempo piece with skittering broken beats. It fits in with the minimal feel of environmental, largely being beats and synth pads with a few reverberating sounds thrown in, but the drums feel more like those on something like The Whispering Masses, giving a feel of a newly developing sound. Unlike some of the more darkly minor key pieces in the band's catalogue, this track has a gentle sadness which cuts deep. The final minute features an environment of flutes and harps, adding a more organic touch to the piece. A beautiful, albeit minimal track. Wait. Greetings 2018 calendar subscribers, it's time for the second track in the 2018 calendar series. The Future Sound of London provide again with the track Wait. We hope you enjoy. FSOLDigital. Either a dramatically updated archive piece or a new recording, Wait is a dark piece again with Whispering Masses style broken beats, a heavy kick drum, environments 4-esque string sounds and chunky analog arpeggios. It's an unusually fast and intense piece for this end of the band's sound. The amount of samples, whistling, strange sucking sounds thrown in during the mix feels very much like their 90s approach, making me more inclined to think it's an enhanced archive track. The final 2 minutes are an environment opening with bongos and strings before moving into acoustic guitar loops and synth pads. Unusual but excellent. Cynthia A, Surrounding the Garden is a Fog. When I was helping to choose the track list for the Music from Calendars compilation, which I'll be looking at in a few weeks' time, I was adamant about 3 particular tracks, and this was one. My favourite Cynthia A track to date, Surrounding the Garden is a Fog, is a real stunner. Gentle minor key sequences over which layers of improvisation and melodies swell and increase over the track's 5-minute runtime. The title is incredibly apt, summing up the eerie, haunting atmosphere created by the music. On Music for Calendars, the piece closes with a brief environment of waves hitting the shore. Nearfield. Greetings 2018 calendar subscribers, here is the 4th track in the 2018 calendar series. This month, the Future Sound of London bring us a track from the vast archives called Nearfield. We hope you enjoy. A dark breaks track with drum loops and ominous bass rumbles, Nearfield is almost certainly an ISDN era outtake. Despite organ-like pads and layers of samples, it's a fairly minimal, repetitive piece and thus feels at home alongside some of the more recent tracks on the album. The track's cover art appears without the overlaid orange shimmer as the cover of Music from Calendars, released 3 years later. For the piece's appearance on that compilation, it closes with the flute and harp environment first heard at the end of Destination. Greek something. Greek for light. This is an outtake from Environment 6, and it sounds it. Glitchy IDM beats, moody pads, a generally dark feel. An alternate mix appears on From the Archives 9 under the name Light. Filter and Pulses, Control Vista, also known as FSOLDigital Control Vista. Hi 2018 calendar subscribers, here's the 6th track in the 2018 calendar series. This month, to celebrate the imminent release of the FSOLDigital SX1, we have a track taken from the forthcoming Filter and Pulses EP, Control Vista. A quiet, abstract track of gently oscillating SX1 tones and crumbling rhythmic pulses. Mellow pads appear in the second half, adding a more musical element. Little more than an experiment, it nevertheless acts as an intriguing and welcome gap in between some of the more rhythmic pieces on the album. When the track appeared on Bandcamp, the artist's name changed to FSOLDigital, suggesting the Filter and Pulses alias and its EP have been scrapped. The EP's working title, Control Vista, would end up being reused a couple of years later. The Future Sound of London 303 HF5. This month is a blast from the past. 303 HF5 is taken from the many tracks that span 30 years of FSOL back catalogue. With its punchy beats and 303 squelches, it's unsurprising to learn that this track dates to the pre-Lifeforms era, either one of the later Passion Music tracks or an early Tales of Ephedrina session. The drums are staggered with no concessions to dance music, and the synth pads are beautiful and atmospheric, landing at an intersection between the two eras of the band's sound. Is rumoured to have come from a large box of DATs from this era, at the beginning of an era where the archive pieces began to focus quite heavily on the earlier days of the band's recording. Future Sound of London Blacked Out Windows, also known as Blacked Out Window. This month, the Future Sound of London offer an outtake from the Environment 6 album called Blacked Out Window, at which point I remarked, how in God's name are there more Environment 6 outtakes? It's not hard to hear how the track was left off Environment 6, its pitch black atmosphere being too heavy going for even that sinister sounding album. The beats are slow, consisting largely of micro glitches, while the synths are murky with very few discernible melodies amidst all the swelling tones and time-stretched samples. Sounding like nothing else in FSOL history, Blacked Out Windows, as it appears on Music from Calendars, is a harrowing but fascinating piece of dark electronic music. Memories of a Yesterday. This month it is the Future Sound of London again, this time offering an outtake from the Archive 9 album called Memories of a Yesterday. The idea of an outtake from an outtakes album amused some people, although it's clear at this point that the From the Archives albums were being treated very much like proper albums, and so this was something on the shortlist that didn't quite make it to the final cut. Indeed, there were several different mixdowns of that record made. This was probably on one of those. With minimal, tinny beats and layers of synth pads, it sounds more like a 2010s outtake than a 90s one, although it's very difficult to tell at this point. Its slow, melancholic vibe is perfectly suited to its position closing Music from Calendars. The reverb-heavy piano and field recording outro environment is heavily truncated for its appearance on that compilation. I used the track's beautiful embedded cover for my own CDR edition of the album. Future Sound of London Transmission Edit 6. Another piece shortlisted for From the Archives Volume 9 but left off the final mix. The oddly named Transmission Edit 6 is another that dates to the pre-Virgin era with an unusually fast 4-to-the-floor beat, airy synth pads and some very familiar samples. If anyone can identify where else the flute and brief field recording snippet are used, please let me know, because I've racked my brain and I just can't piece it together. It ends on a brief, bizarre loop closing environment. Despite the tempo, it's a surprisingly atmospheric sounding piece, although perhaps unsurprising that it was left off Archive 9, not quite fitting in with that record's darker feel. The embedded art allows a peek at the Earthbeat studio. analog controlled solenoids. Glockenspiel snare kitchen tray. Created using 4 CV controlled solenoids playing a glockenspiel, a snare and a kitchen tray, then overlaid with various synths. This track is taken from an unreleased 16-track album by ACS. Each track was created using a variety of acoustic percussive objects triggered by fast-reacting solenoids. Recorded at 9L West 2016, engineered by Yage. Another unusual experiment and new alias. Been trying very hard to ignore all the crazy caps for the past 4 years though. Or could easily have just been a brief odd percussive piece is fleshed out using synth pads, giving it an eerie atmosphere. These strange sounding rhythms and dark rustic atmosphere are somewhat reminiscent of the Sun Monitor tapes. I'd love to hear more from this project, or even have bits of it appear on an FSOL track. Humanoid Intermodal Container. 2018 closes with a Humanoid track and one very much at odds with the 30303 EP and Solid Steel guest mix, which had only been heard a few weeks before. I'll be covering those in a couple of weeks' time. Intermodal Container is very much in the Environment 6 trilogy mould, with skittering IDM beats, icy synth pads and arpeggiated melodies right down to the atmospheric outro environment of water splashes. Regardless of its uncharacteristic sound, it's one of my favourite pieces of the modern humanoid era. The Future Sound of London, Ramblings of a Madman Volume 2. Release date 13th April 2018. A mere 5 months after the first Ramblings of a Madman zine, the second appeared. As with the first, bundles were made available, with the zine and digital EP available to buy alongside one-of-a-kind art prints and hoodies. This time I opted out of the print option. I really don't have the wall space, although they appear to all be in the same style as the first. The book is stylistically in line with the first two, 96 A6 pages of visual collages and stories. Among new and familiar band shots, landscape photos, press cuttings, studio photographs, EMS and Digitana gear and album art are once again some intriguing teasers, including a reference to 1973 electronics group The Mysterious Artist, listed on the EBS 7 track list, a mailing list postcard from a 1990s CD single, a postcard to Brian Doggin from the late 80s featuring B's address at the time, which turned out to be a 2-minute walk from where I lived in Manchester. Abbey Road master CDs from early 2002, including one for Galaxial Pharmaceutical, giving an idea of just how late the title was changed to the isness, with a catalogue number of Artful CD 45, and one for, bizarrely, the piano section of Theram. Julian Opie's Garry Popstar painting, one version of which I just discovered was in the Tate, which really amuses me. The credits section erroneously listing it as Volume 1. Story-wise, there are a generous 14 this time. It sparkles and everything, a hilarious story about the trials and tribulations involved in trying to get the band's state-of-the-art 1990s videos made, including an explanation of why the My Kingdom dinosaurs look so crap, and a return of wide-angle anal. I Not Do This, I Cannot Swim, from the old official site, a story about Vit and the Far Out Son of Lung video. John Peel, The Layers of the ISDN Onion, Gaz on his nervousness talking to Peel before and after the 1997 Peel session. Ever So Hell, Gaz gets angry about a printing site advertising illegal FSOL t-shirts on Facebook, and gets even angrier when the company mispronounced FSOL. Manchester, Brian and Gaz try to film some footage from the early days of the Stone Roses, misses the shit band anyway outro from the EBV site version. Neighbours, the wonderfully surreal story from the Dead Cities book, Dead Skin Cells, and another. Beach Shot, and a third. This brief story also appeared on the official site. Tales of Ephedrina, EBV and official store description of that album. Lifeforms, the EPV site description of Lifeforms as an album without hits. Sleight of Hand, 2001 official store description of the Oil 12-inch EP and foundation of the 1997 incarnation of the EBV label. Teachings from the Electronic Brain, brief description of the film from the EBV site. Transmissions, the longer story from the white ISDN booklet. Lifeforms glossary, Lifeforms titles. Descriptions of several track titles, once again originally seen on earlier official sites. The EP, once again, is like the previous one with 6 tracks of no given origin, and again they're all likely to have been recorded around that time. A mixture of glitchy IDM and textural ambient is present throughout. The EP appears in full on Music for 3 books. Magnify Within the Thought, another of the jazz-tinged tracks from the FSOLDigital era, a sound that appears sporadically and never disappoints. It opens with an extended ambient intro with fuzzy, textured synths, guitar riffs and occasional clattering percussion, before a slow swing beat and double bass loop enter, allowing synths to improvise on top. One day the Jazz Mags will do an album that sounds like this kind of thing and I'll be incredibly happy. Replace I with You. Brian and Gaz have always been searching for sounds and ideas, and this includes an everyday conversation. The title of this track came from an online conversation I had with Brian, in which he accidentally wrote I instead of you, corrected it, and then noted the correction down as a potential title. It's a mundane explanation for a potentially quite eerie name, and that eeriness matches the music. In fact, Replace I with You is an almost harrowingly dark piece. The Environment 6 glitchy IDM sound is turned up a few notches here, faster, louder, with growlier sounds, on a piece that sounds like it's coming after you in a particularly speedy vehicle. It's remarkable to think that this is less than 3 years after tracks like A Somnambulant Drift. Viewed from Trains. The Views series continues with this brief piece, which opens with a minute of synth ambience and field recordings before warm piano arpeggios eventually arrive. One of these simpler and more uplifting pieces in the series with all the beauty and texture one would expect. External Limits. The beats of External Limits always remind me of the desert feel of From the Archives Volume 7. It's a fairly stripped back track with archived environmental view style textures in the background and acoustic percussion over the top. A few synth growls appear as well as a brief burst of backwards guitar, but it's generally low on melody. To Become Silent. The one standalone environment on both Ramblings Volume 2 and Music for 3 books. To Become Silent sounds a lot like an Environment 6 piece with chirping crickets and water splashes, a brief moment of strings and flute at the start, quiet synth drones and comparatively little else. Also acts as an enjoyable breather between tracks, although it feels more suitable as an outro to External Limits than its own piece. Skylines. The only appearance of the minor key, arpeggio-led electronic style on the second Ramblings EP, Skylines is a beautiful Environment 6 style piece with regularly changing synth sequences, slow drum machine beats, shimmering synth pads and a generally melancholic sound. It's quite likely that a significant amount of the track was made using the Halia. And that's a lot for this week. I hope you enjoyed the video. Drop me some comments down below, or a like, a subscribe, share the video with someone, the usual YouTube stuff. I will be back very soon, this time next week, looking at the first in the band's re-recording series, so I hope you'll join me then.